Colleen, you ready to go live? And I ask Colleen Graham, the recording secretary, to take a roll call.
Mike Lamani?
Here.
Dave Broughton?
Here.
Mike Delavecchio?
Here.
David Bounds?
Here.
Ann Denayo?
Here.
And Lynn Pitardo.
Here. And in the absence of other members, I will ask Mike to take a seat. Okay, thank you. And attendance is Dean Guthrie and Brandy Laughlin, the director and assistant director of the planning department. And we have a resignation, I understand. That's
Yes,
from
Mr.
Jay.
Tyven has made it known that he will no longer serve on the board.
Okay. I guess we'll accept that. And can we have the acceptance of the meeting from January 12th? Has anybody,
I make a motion, we accept the minutes of the meeting of January 12th.
has been accepted?
I'll accept it, I second that.
I'm going to change the order of the agenda, and I'm going to put the application acceptance right after the extension. So we'll do the extension, application, acceptance, and then we'll move on into the public hearing.
I think you need to accept the minutes.
Yep.
We got a motion
Well,
on,
I don't think we have to accept them anymore, the meetings, the minutes. We do that, but we don't have to accept them. Okay, but we just acknowledge it. That's, I think we should accept it, but we don't, legally, we don't have to.
whether we acknowledge it or whether we accept it.
That's got it, right. In the extensions here, we have an extension for Centurion Avenue, and they request an extension. So there's not a public hearing, and no one can speak on it. Is the applicant here? Is that, I guess that's Aquarius Centurion Road? Centurion Road, right? Avenue?
Yeah,
That's you,
Centennial Ave.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason for your extension?
It's the same as last year. We're just hoping you guys will give us the chance to keep moving forward. You know, we've built the first 3 phases so far, and we're constantly under improvement and expansion. That's pretty much it.
So what are you looking for time-wise? How much more time, or?
Realistically, by the time we would break ground on the next phase, we would be back here to modify the existing site plan. So you guys would be well aware of it. The existing site plan as it is would still need further modification, so we'd be submitting a new application and everything to modify it.
So it'll be a new application, you're gonna do the whole new round of events, are you? Is that right?
Say that again?
So you're gonna put in a new application, is that what you said? Could you speak into the mic? I'm not sure I'm hearing.
Yeah, so it would be internal modifications to the structure. So we would be back here to say, you know, instead of X use, it's going to be this use. So you guys would be informed, like you guys in the past have always wanted to know, you know, how things are going. So that would be us letting you know.
I'm having a hard time hearing you because
Me
that-
too.
Oh, it sounds like I'm in this.
You got a microphone, is it?
Yeah, it's the new speakers. I think it's loud. You guys can probably hear me, right? Yeah, so it's really loud here, but they look like they're pointed this way now. You guys got this new setup.
Over here, okay.
Maybe I should yell instead of into the microphone so you can hear me. Sorry
We heard
about that.
enough, I guess.
So we have been working with the applicant, and they are getting ready to do another phase, and that will require a modification to their approval from several years ago.
Okay.
And they're hoping to do that sometime this year.
So they're gonna go through a TRC and all that?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just want to keep our existing site plan in good standing with you folks.
Okay, we'll need a vote on this from the board. We have a vote to,
Again, what kind of extension are you looking for? 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year?
You guys usually do the 1 year.
That's my question, a year?
Yeah, 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
you making a motion? Are you making a motion to extend it a year?
Do you want me to do that?
If you do, we need a motion, so.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the 1-year extension in regards to the 05-014 SP, comma, 017 CUP, and 018 CUP.
I second.
Seconded, All in favor? Aye. Okay. Get your extension.
Awesome, thanks.
We will move the application of the, application acceptance, it's on regards to 291 Union Ave, and we'll put that next on the agenda. And is this ready?
Ready to go, and everything's good.
Ready for the hearing, okay? Can we have a motion to accept the application as being complete and schedule a public hearing? Have a
So
motion?
moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Public hearing will be March 6th, okay? Thank you. Okay, at this time, I would, I think I'll put the chair into, let David sit in the chair. Could you chair the meeting?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna stay right here. This is it, and then we're gonna do the
A
next
couple,
one.
a couple other things, yeah.
And then on Thursday, you're gonna be there, right?
I'll be there.
All right, okay. Just for the record, my name is David Bounds. I'm the City Council Liaison to the Planning Board. The chairman, Mr. Cotardo, has recused himself from this matter as we take yet another evening of comment with respect to this matter. So I'm going to open up PL 2011-0024 SP, 0026 CUP, 0027 CUP, what we know as Langley Cove. And I guess I'll hear from the applicant first in terms of any updates you have for us on what's going on.
Okay. Sorry. At the last meeting, one of the things that we discussed traffic a whole bunch more, and one of the things the board had asked us to have Jeff Dirk look at. He wasn't available this evening. He had another meeting down in Massachusetts they had to go to. But one of the things that you asked him to look at was the intersection of White Oaks Road and 11B, up basically at the Surf Coaster property. And he did go through, he did counts, he went through and did basically doubled all the counts to account for summer traffic. He accounted for all the different projects that are online being built and are approved at this point to account for what will be the conditions in the future at that intersection. There was basically nothing in the way it exists right now that's in failure. It functions at a level A at most times, and a C at once in a while during the summer. At the end of 2028, full build out of the site, it still doesn't require anything. It basically adds about 1 second onto the average wait time at that intersection, and the queue.
You're talking coming out onto White Oaks
Yeah.
Road?
And the queue for people trying to get onto White Oaks Road, it's generally 1 to 2 cars. If it's a busy time, it's 1 to 2 cars that are queued. There will be exceptions to that rule where there's more at different times, but at full build out, we're basically adding one car every 3 minutes to the intersection, and the queue time is only like 25, 30 seconds to get onto the road. So the full build out of the project in 2028 will add another car, so it'll add about 1 more second on the average to your wait time at that intersection. What he suggested was if the Surf Coaster site ever gets under construction or something gets approved there, that would be the ideal time to add like a right turn lane or a left turn lane in or something like that. But nothing with the Langley Cove project will trip any required improvements at that intersection.
So you're suggesting that there's no need for consideration of a right-hand turn lane?
No,
At this point in time?
No.
In terms of this project?
no, not even after the 2028 build out.
Do you folks agree?
According to the report, it's basically Route 11B section is an A now, and in 10 years it would still be an A.
Okay.
And this is on an A to F, scale, and A's good, still good.
A's still passing, huh?
Yep.
A is still passing, and White Oaks onto 11B is a C now, and it will continue to be a C.
Okay.
So, yes, there are a few additional cars per hour, per day, however you want to look at it, but it does not change the status of the rating.
Well, as long as you're satisfied.
Yep.
Okay. Anything further?
No, we've been working with staff on the different documents and things like that, and we have it down to a pretty concise list. We've been going over, the final documents that need to be approved, and we're down to like clean up on a couple, I think 3 at total, maybe even 2 at this point. But we're basically done with all the documents. We're done with all the agreements with Waterworks. Basically wrapping everything up with staff, so.
Hey, John,
Yes.
when you say we're done with Waterworks, I sent comments over to them
Oh, okay.
today.
Okay.
So we are in the last round of comments with Waterworks. I didn't want you to think that we're done with them, but I sent them a short list of comments today, and I'm expecting some comments back on those.
How are we doing on the, what I'll call the 12, 13, 17 memo with respect to the things that the planning department was hoping to get and expecting?
Actually, that's a great jumping point for me. What I gave the board tonight is an update to that. You've got 2 documents in front of you. Staff has gone over these with the applicant. There are a couple things we talked about changing. I haven't incorporated those changes yet, but these aren't final recommendations. These are kind of what we're thinking about and what we've addressed with the applicant throughout our review process. So the first document you have is a summary of items that we're recommending be finalized before we come with our final staff review and all those ultimate conditions of approval, should the board vote to approve it. The normal staff review you get, basically. We're holding off on that until we finalize these issues.
So I'm looking at the 2618 memo?
Yep, so the one-page one has those 3 items that we're waiting on. One is that agreement with the water department. The second one is a discussion to be had with DPW about the status of a jack arch section of the bridge over Langley Brook. That's really a matter of timing, because that bridge, that portion of the bridge, it's one bridge, but it's got an older section, and that older section is red listed and really can't handle too much traffic. At some point, the project requires a widening there, so DPW needs to know when that might happen, because they need to get this bridge on the 10-year plan so we can get it funded and make sure that work happens in time to help accommodate that project.
Do we expect to have that complete by next meeting?
I think they've been,
Yeah, it's the discussion.
Yeah.
We know what our timing is, and we just have to sit down with DPW. So that's something that's easily done by next meeting.
Because I'm getting sick and tired of these hearings. Oh, I'm only kidding.
so the final item that we want addressed prior to giving you our final recommendations is just the open space, what we've been calling open space management plan. We are working with them. It's the ball's in our court right now. We have to send them some revisions that we'd like to see, just because the language was a little complicated for an average person to read. And if the homeowners association is going to take this document over at some point, it needs to be easy for them to understand what their obligations were and what their rights were, and all of those things that it entails. So we're just working on some language cleanup for that. So we've been working with the applicant. We've been in touch with them, so they're aware. Some of the work's on our end that needs to be done. Some's on their end that needs to be done. But we're working together to get that resolved. The other document you have here is several pages. I wanted the board to see all of the items that we had been attempting to address with conditions of approval. A lot of them are concerns that have been expressed at the meetings so far. Some of them are ones that may come up in the future. So we want the board to see all the work that's been going on. I'm happy to go through item by item or a quick preview, whatever you might be interested in.
I would suggest we start with what major concerns you have that remain, and then if we have any questions about the remainder, we can ask you.
So I would say at this point, I wouldn't call them major concerns, but I would want to point out a couple of the key conditions of approval that we'd be recommending.
Okay.
The first one I would start with is a pretty standard one. We put it on all our phased projects, but number 4, any changes in the proposed phasing order must be approved by the planning board as a site plan amendment. That's standard for any phased project. I just wanted to bring it up to the board because often that's a question, well, can you skip this and go to that, and how does that affect, the drainage or however that might go? So that's a standard condition. We're going to suggest requiring water quality sampling of Langley Brook and Paugus Bay, pre-construction, during and post-construction, all for comparison to ensure that the water quality stays up to par. That's a fairly standard condition for anywhere we're concerned about water quality. We are working on item number 7. We discussed with the applicant. We've got to tweak that language. It's a little too general. That's about lake access. We want to make it clear that the homeowners association is not to assign any lake access to the full homeowners association. There's a couple questions about that. We're looking for a sequence of events here. There's a 1,900 feet of water line work, and that's what the water line agreement is about. We're recommending that be completed prior to issuing any building permits because we don't want combustible material stored on site without water. Construction vehicles must only arrive from the southern portion of Weirs Boulevard and exit heading south only. That's to keep them from crossing that portion of the bridge that we have concerns about. And also, we want them not to travel through Paugus Woods. We know the roads are already in poor conditions up there, and we really don't need the folks in that neighborhood having big construction vehicles and traffic going through there. So one way in, one way out for construction vehicles.
Who's going to monitor that?
I mean, it will have one other thing. If you go down to number 14, we're recommending a third-party site work inspector during construction. They won't be there, 40 hours a week, 5 days a week, 8 hours, whatever. But at any point during the project that additional oversight is required, we're recommending we have a third-party site work inspector be available to go out there. We did something similar with Lilac Valley. They did a precast bridge, and we had someone go out, and it was like once a day or every other, whenever they were doing work that called for it. And that would be paid for by the applicant, but through us. So they wouldn't hire this person. They would give us the funds in an escrow account. We would pay this person. So that person would be keeping an eye out for compliance.
So how do we fall back on if some construction guy's driving through there constantly and just disobeying the rules?
Well, we won't have a road up into Paugus Woods until after phase 2.
After phase 2 is completely done, like
Yeah.
that phase 2 has to be completed before there is even anything up there.
That will connect it?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
for a while, anyway, there won't be any construction, they won't even be accessible. Once it's connected, you know, like I said, we'll have the on-site inspector, hopefully they'll watch for that. If, you know, if the folks in Pogus Woods see construction vehicles rolling through, you know, give us a call and we'll go down and check it out, and if it's a condition of approval of the planning board, they've got to comply with it.
We will have staff there on
Yeah.
a regular basis, you know, city staff. We'll have building inspector, and we will have conservation technician, and myself or Brandy will be there on occasion anyway, so.
At the start of each phase as well, I don't remember which, number 23. At the start of each phase, we're gonna have a pre-construction meeting, which is a standard procedure that we follow. And at that pre-construction meeting, the applicant or their representative comes, as well as usually the site manager, the site work manager, and then any other key contractors that might be on site. So they'll all be informed of what the rules are as well at that point. So we'll know, you know, if the subcontractors aren't told, then, you know, some people might have to be told. But at that pre-construction meeting, all the key players are there, and they'll know what is expected of them.
But there's probably one key player that's not gonna be there, right? That's the people from Pogus Woods.
At the
Is
pre-construction
there
meeting?
gonna be a representative from Pogus Woods to air their views of the problems that has come up, that they wanna make sure that that doesn't happen again?
At the pre-construction meetings?
Yeah.
It's not normal that they're posted as public meetings, because they're not really decision-making meetings. I mean, that being said, at any point, if anyone has concerns, they can always come down to the department or give us a call or anything.
So they do have a say.
Yeah, I mean, through us, they
Yeah.
certainly do, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, if we hear of any complaints, that's gonna be top of the list when we have the pre-construction
Yeah.
meeting. Absolutely.
As part of that bridge issue, we're looking for the applicant to install jersey barriers to block that portion of the bridge off, just to make sure that no traffic goes over it, because we do have concerns. We're also looking for a third-party compaction tester, during.
Number is that?
18.
Number 18, sorry. During appropriate site work and in the building permit stage, as needed during construction of retaining walls, foundations, et cetera. There's gonna be a lot of fill and retaining walls and that kind of stuff happening, and we wanna make sure that it's all checked out properly. This is a huge project, and, you know, we don't necessarily have the manpower to send our staff out all the time. So these third-party inspectors are gonna be critical in helping us keep up with it. Number 21 is a condition that, a standard condition we've been adding recently in the last year or so to our approvals. And that's a sign must be erected prior to construction of each phase indicating the primary contact information, emergency contact information, and hours of operation for the site. So this also provides folks who might have questions or concerns with a number, someone outside the city to contact. They can always contact us, absolutely. But this also gives them another avenue to contact maybe the site manager directly if there's a small issue that they feel can maybe be addressed that way. It's an attempt at transparency and communication. We've got a couple of conditions about sewer items, construction inspections. These are fairly standard DPW conditions here. 27. Number 28 is a bunch of kind of plan revisions that DPW will be looking for just in regards to the Weirs Boulevard improvements that the applicant will be making. And then number 29 is 29, 30, and 31 are items that I think we talked about at the last meeting. Upon opening the connection between Pogus Woods and Langley Cove, the developer must repair those portions of Sarasota Lane and Palmetto Lane most likely to be traveled by Langley Cove residents. And then number 30, we're recommending installation. That should just be a 4-way stop sign where Palmetto and Siesta are. And if there's not already a stop sign, I think we talked about this one, there already is one there. So number 31, I think, can be disregarded. So we've been talking about a lot of, and this is not comprehensive of all of the conditions or plan revisions. that we're looking at. But we have been trying to address things in the background. So just wanted to go over that with you and show you what we have, and make sure that anything else you come up with, we might have waiting in the wings, or if not, we want to make sure we add it.
I just have one thing. Driving over here tonight, I don't know why the school buses are out so late, but the kids running across the street tonight just scared the hell out of me. What provisions does this development have as far as kids getting there, if there are kids that go to school in this development? The safety of these kids waiting for a bus or getting on and off the bus, coming across Where's Beach Boulevard. If the bus is across the street coming this way, is there any provisions as far as that traffic safety?
We don't actually have a bus stop area in the development, but we have a bunch of areas that are like guest park or extra parking areas and things like that. I mean, we could designate a spot that kids get on and off the bus in the development rather than being on Weirs Boulevard.
I do see in some of the developments, they have like a little house that the kids wait in.
Yep.
Did they have one in Pogus Woods?
No. No.
Are there kids in Pogus Woods? There are. And where do they wait for their bus?
They stop at the end of Sarasota. They stop at the end of Sarasota on White Oaks.
Right at the intersection, that little intersection?
Yeah, Sarasota and White Oaks.
So where would the kids in this Langley Cove, down by the pump house, wait for the bus?
No, I don't know. We haven't actually set a spot, so we can add that into the list and I can put together something. So that's never been asked before.
The kids have to walk, especially in the winter time, because our sidewalks are not plowed and they have to walk in the street to get to their homes.
That's because it's not maintained by the town.
Yeah, I'm not sure that,
City street.
that school buses can go on private roads.
Right,
I mean,
so I'm thinking
not
they're gonna
sure
have to
of
be
the-
down by the pump house.
I'm not sure of the policy, but I suspect that may be the case.
Yeah.
I think it is.
It just,
I think
that
it
just
is.
struck me really, when I saw these kids running across Union Avenue tonight in the dark. I don't know how much lighting is gonna be at the end of that entryway into Where's Beach Boulevard. Is there streetlights or something? or
There's some lights
type of
down, there's some lights down at the bottom, but it's mainly concentrated at intersections only, like
Yeah.
for the lights. And then there's some lighting on the buildings themselves, but
We can look at appropriate street, overhead street lighting
Yeah.
for that intersection to make sure there's enough lumens to,
Yeah, I don't know what's there
I mean,
now
that
at
would-
night. I recall if there's lighting in that area now or not.
I don't know either, but we can look at that, and that not only would help the situation that you're describing, but would also help with traffic in and out and people's visibility of cars that are either waiting to turn in or come out or whatever,
Yeah.
so that would be an important item, yep.
Yeah, it was just, I was only one car behind that bus, and I couldn't see the kids crossing the street. That's how dark it was on Union Avenue.
I don't know why the school was getting out so late. There must have been some kind of
Well,
event or
is it
something.
because they had so many snow days and they have to, many hours further? I don't know.
Do they have a late bus? Do they have a
Probably,
late bus
it was probably a sports thing
Yeah.
or something like that. It's an
bus?
after-school activity.
It's probably
not
after-school
school getting out.
activity.
Yeah,
Yeah, because it was, kids on the bus, getting off the bus
yeah.
at 5:30.
Okay. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I didn't, as I said, this isn't totally comprehensive, but it's pretty representative of the types of issues we've been trying to address throughout our whole review process, so.
Okay.
Oh, I do actually have one more thing. The request of the board at the last meeting concerning cost sharing of maintenance within Pogus Woods, we have not had that discussion yet with the applicant, but we will.
Okay. Because my comment is with respect to paragraph 29 and what you're doing with Sarasota Lane and Palmetto Lane. And I guess I'll ask the applicant openly, and you can address it now or wait or whatever, but it's going to be a question that I have. And that is, I think that paragraph 29 has to be a little more specific as to what it actually we're looking for them to repair or bring up to speed. What we mean.
As far as,
Pavement condition?
yeah, condition? Is it-
Pavement condition and
Yeah.
drainage issues. I know there are some drainage issues there as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
okay. And I'll ask my question that I've been asking all along, and that is what the applicant is going to do to address some of the concerns that have been raised by residents of Pogus Woods in regards to the condition of their roads, which is now going on more than 10 years, where we haven't had any really finished work done on that project. And I'm not getting into any legalese, I'm not getting into any issues of why or who or when. I just want to know how we can address those concerns substantively as we go through this project. This is going to have an impact on everybody in Pogus Woods, and it's going to have an impact on a lot of other people too. This is a, as Brandy describes it, a huge project. And we just need to make sure that we're doing what we can, and we're asking you to do what you can to address the ongoing concerns of those folks at Pogus Woods. Now, I understand that's a difficult task for you, and there's a lot of what I'll call rancor. I think that's a fair description of it. But I want to move forward and not backwards, so I want to look for solutions. And not reasons why this happened or didn't happen. I want to move forward. I want to take 2 steps forward and address those issues on a long-term basis.
Okay.
My thoughts.
Well, one of the things with Pogus Woods is not even half constructed yet. The Phase 3 is another 45 units and several more roads.
I
So-
get it.
So there's going to be plenty of construction traffic eventually in Pogus Woods as soon as that goes under construction too. That will have nothing to do with Langley. So-
I get it. I get it that the reason that there hasn't been finished work done is because the second phase of Pogus Woods hasn't been started yet. I get that.
Third phase.
Third phase.
Yep.
Yeah, I get my numbers mixed up. I get that. I understand that. But that shouldn't prevent you from addressing at this time, in the long run, how we're going to address those issues for those folks who are going to live there for a very long time, for those folks in Pogus Woods and those folks in Langley Cove also. So I'm just putting my thoughts on the table here in terms of where I'm coming from, so there won't be any surprises. Does the applicant have anything more to offer at this point?
Not this time.
Okay. So at this point in time, I'll call it, open it up for a public hearing. It's really not, but I'll open it up for public comment with respect to this matter. We do have a letter from a Dennis J. Petersons. It's part of the record at this point in time. It's a 2-page or 1.5-page letter. If anybody hasn't seen it and they want to see it, we can make that available for you at this point in time.
I believe it's also available digitally, with the digital packet on the city's website,
Okay,
so.
okay.
Is this also on there, Brandy?
That is not, that was just given to you tonight.
So the people in Pogus Woods could actually have access to
If they
this?
would like a copy, I can certainly give them a copy, yep.
You're going to put that up. It's going to be on the site pretty soon.
So whatever recommendations we might have for the meeting next month, it'll certainly be part of that packet.
Okay,
We won't put a separate packet because there's not a meeting associated with it, so we don't really have that ability. But we can certainly, if anyone wants a copy of this, I can certainly, send me an email or give us a call, we can get you one.
and you're talking about 2 memos.
Correct.
They're both dated February 6, 2018.
That is correct.
One is a one-page memo, and the second one is six-page memo with 31 separate bullet points. And we'll just want to be as transparent about this as possible and get them out to the public so everybody can view them. Well, now is your time, folks, if you want to step up to the podium and tell us your name and speak your mind.
Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, my name is Dennis Peterson, the same one that had the correspondence there. I'm a homeowner at Paugus Woods, and I've been there since 2010. When we talk about Phase 3, I had to laugh back there because none of us in Paugus Woods believe that's ever going to become a reality. And we know, we've heard rumors that he's trying to sell that property, and probably will once Langley Cove is in the process of being developed. So I don't know where that's going to leave us, but I'm here tonight because I have some significant concerns about Brady Sullivan, who developed Paugus Woods back in 2006 and continues to get permits to develop new land in Laconia despite the lack of consideration for bylaws, poor quality of work, and the impact it's had on the residents that have invested their properties. Over the past several years, Brady Sullivan has been a repeat offender in the New England area of both lawsuits and enforcement actions as a result of their poor work. Such sites as Worcester, Mass., Lebanon, New Hampshire, Londonderry, New Hampshire, Lawrence, Mass., Deerfield, Vermont, Clinton, Mass., Manchester, New Hampshire, Coventry, Rhode Island, and Laconia itself have all had incidents of poor workmanship by Mr. Sullivan's plan. Maybe you heard about the recent $60 million lawsuit due to poor workmanship, negligence, and environmental issues against Brady Sullivan for a newly constructed apartment complex they built in Rhode Island. Several residents were breathing in black mold, which caused a number of medical issues for residents. And I have a copy of the complaint here, which I'd be glad to share with the board, if you want to. I've highlighted probably the more important issues. Or perhaps you're familiar with Don and Dan Crimp from our own Paugus Woods development, who weeks after purchasing their new home dealt with rainwater seeping through the cracks in the foundation, causing yet again mold to seep into the HVAC systems, creating a host of health problems for the couple. The AG's office sued Brady Sullivan for shoddy construction at Paugus Woods in 2011. The safety problems were so pervasive that, according to the state's complaint, they may indicate a pattern of practice by the subdivider to ignore applicable building and house codes in violation of the law. My wife and I have spent thousands of dollars to fix the issues in our home. Cracks in the foundation of our Paugus Woods have caused our basement to completely be flooded more than a half dozen times. We have had to replace our flooring, furniture, and have lost many significant family heirlooms as a result of the damage. Each time we reached out to try to resolve the issue, and we're told it's not our problem. Clearly, there was a foundation flaw in the way these homes were built, and the contractor and builder have not been held accountable. And no permits of the inspection of the foundation can be found in the city records. The list goes on and on with this contractor. My intent here tonight is to call your attention in detail to the serious problems this particular company has caused, out of how they continually overlooked and blatantly ignored important details around their developments. I want this board to do a full investigation to the contractor, their practices, and why they're allowed to continue to develop in Laconia, never mind New Hampshire. When the output of the previous projects have been riddled with problems, I would also ask that the board be more involved in the oversight of any project that this firm takes in the future. All of these past issues should have been under the watchful eye of the city of Laconia. The acting chairman last time said, how did this happen? It happened very similar to the way we're here tonight. It was a planning board just like yourselves that approved the past project of Paugus Woods. This does not look good for you or the city of Laconia. This planning board has the ability and obligation to correct mistakes of the past inflicted on the residents of Paugus Woods. These residents are owed some type of retribution for the mistakes made in the past. by allowing Brady Sullivan to develop a new access road in the area, you are victimizing these residents once again. Had Brady Sullivan come to the residents and developed dialogue and offered to correct or improve living conditions in Paugus Woods, things might have been different, and perhaps some level of trust could have been developed. If this moves forward, I would consider reaching out to the AG's office once again to launch a full investigation into how this contractor continues to get work in this area, given the past misgivings and the ongoing complaints and open issues from residents. The residents of Paugus Woods continue every day with foundation, drainage, and construction issues, while Brady Sullivan continues with their unethical building practices and making millions. How the city of Laconia can even entertain this project by this developer's track record is amazing to me. The ethical and morally right thing to do by this board is to protect the residents of Paugus Woods from the future heartache and financial ruin. Just one question I just wanted some clarification on. I know we mentioned that you were going to have someone oversight the construction phases of that development. Did I hear you correctly that the contractor hires that person and pays for that person?
City hires, they
City
pay for
hires.
it.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Barbetta. I live at 96 Sarasota Lane. And I can attest that foundation problems are an issue. We had Crack X back for the 4th time on Friday, fixing more cracks in the foundation. But my concern is, how can you give access for a completely separate entity through a private thing of Paugus Woods? I don't understand how the city can grant access to one organization through another like that. It's going to affect us because we have to pay for the maintenance of the roads, the snow removal of the roads. Anytime we have to have re-asphalting, it's going to be more crowded. People can't walk on the sidewalk, as he attested to, because in the wintertime, there is no sidewalk. The streets sometimes are really crappy, too. Most of it's been ice all winter, but so they narrow down, and you're going to be adding more traffic. And they're not wide enough for two people to be going at some of the speeds some people sometimes do. And if you're going to be increasing the numbers, the times you're going to have two people trying to get through at the same time, it's going to be a problem. And if you're talking 291 units in this other living center, even if all of them don't come through us, which is supposed to be the plan, but how many will? Half? A quarter? Thank you.
Me again, thanks folks. Paul Wheaton, 537 Wales Boulevard. I'm an eternal abutter. I speak at all of these, trying to follow along with the process, and I appreciate your time, folks. A little concerned about the numbers dwindling here and people recusing themselves, and we've got, how many members are really on the board at any one given time? Could somebody answer that? How many members sit on the board normally? I don't know, I'm just asking.
There are 9 regular positions.
9, and
and
how
then
many are
some
needed?
alternates.
Okay.
And yes, we have an attendance issue.
Okay, and this is something, this is extremely important to a lot of folks out here. This isn't, and I know it's important to you all, too. You all got your lives going on as well, but I'm just concerned about this process. It seems to be, doesn't seem to be as transparent as one might want it to be. And that's just the honest opinion, I think, of everybody out here. For me, my concern, I've already spoken, and to John's credit, he's worked with me well, I'll say that. He's not the builder, the engineer. He's been quite, he's moved some things around and tried to make it feasible for some of us, and we appreciate that. My concern, some of the concerns is the town is proposing a bike path and some traffic that's gonna go up and along this road, Weirs Boulevard, and it's not the builder's problem to do in front of my property, but from the intersection on out. the traffic guy, no matter what he was saying here, we all understand what happens on that corner down there. And to introduce all of this extra bike traffic and pedestrian traffic and all of this unit traffic down here, someone wisely said before on this board, if this was on 106, it's a no-brainer, you'd put it in. But this isn't on 106. This is right up here in the Weirs Boulevard area. And to feed all of that traffic down in there, we're gonna have problems. It just can't be helped. And we don't want any problems. Nobody here wants any problems. We're not trying to make problems for anybody else either. But and if you look at the way that road is proposed to go in, when I was a kid, we used to call it the danger road. It's a little steep road that cut up to the trailer park, and it was fairly steep. But now we drive around where it's a little more shallow. Well, the road's gonna go up that steep road. Who sands and salts that so that these cars that are packed in there and waiting aren't sliding down onto the boulevard? Is that a town? I don't believe it's the town road, is it? So we're relying on the builder to come through and sand again and keep safety where the kids are waiting for the bus down at the end of the road. Is this really somebody we want to trust that with? Honestly, the documents are there. You're hearing real-life people talking here. This isn't TV. This is their lives. And they came to Laconia because this is a great place to live, and we're trusting in our officials to make the decisions that's best for everybody, not just us, but everybody. And I just wonder, with the dwindling numbers and what's going on, if we're really getting served what we need to have served to us. No offense to any of you. I know you're using your own time to do this, all of you. But it's something that needs to be thought about, please. So we don't know who's going to control and sand that steep road coming to the intersection. We're going to be bringing more traffic down in there with bikers and pedestrians and all that coming in. You know it's going to be stacked 6, 7 deep, 12 deep, depending in the summer. We're really just asking for a lot of problems here that we don't seem to be, we're going to address. I mean, I have no offense to Paugus Woods. I mean, they're dealing with their own headaches, really, and then we're getting the headache too. It's coming our way, I guess. My concern with the traffic is that the construction, you say they have to head south on the boulevard, so that's right in front of my house. Are there hours with which they'll be operating? Are there any restrictions come summertime, like there are with getting the water line in on Weirs Boulevard during the summertime? Are there any restrictions on that truck traffic? Is there any restrictions, or they can come in at 6 in the morning and work till 10 at night?
That would be one of the things that we would cover in the pre-construction meetings, and we would try to make it reasonable hours. I understand your concern about too early and too late.
But there's nothing written, we'll have a conversation.
Not yet.
Okay. We've been having conversations. How long we've been having conversations about this project? A long time. We're trying to make this move forward. It just seems to keep going sideways all the time here. I've had the roadway up around the corner to myself and the elderly couple behind me and up to Jack's place. We're sanding and shoveling that myself. I'm throwing salt out there. I couldn't get oil delivered the other day. They couldn't make it up the dang road. My son got stuck getting up. I got stuck getting up. There's no maintenance going on with any of these roadways up there. And why do we think they're going to take care of it once this project goes through? It just doesn't it's not logical at all.
Whose responsibility is it now?
I don't know. I'm taking it upon myself, sir, to make sure it happens.
It's not a public road, is it?
I have no idea. It's not my road. It's not my road. But who has the legal responsibility for that couple behind me to get fire personnel and ambulances to them? Who's that? Is that the homeowner's responsibility here in Laconia, or is that somebody else's?
If it's a private road, where I live is a private road, it's my responsibility.
Okay, well, is it a private road? Can you answer that question for me?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
I don't know.
You live there, I don't.
I know it's not my road. We've had right-of-way since '53, but it's not my road. I believe it's owned by Brady Sullivan, is my point, and it's not being maintained. So.
Well, he hasn't owned it for 30-some-odd years.
I
thought it was a campground.
I understand that. So you answer me this then, sir. If something happens to that couple behind me and they die up there because nobody can get up there, we're going to squabble about who's supposed to be taking care of the damn road? It should be taken care of, period.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Who is supposed to?
I guess he is, if he owns it, and he's not.
It's an easement that they have to go across our property, but it's a driveway it's a common driveway at this point. There's no development that exists, so there's nothing other than an easement with their driveway going across our land.
There's electric power up that way. There's all kinds of stuff up there. So I guess he's on his own back there. I'm not so worried about me. I'm worried about the people behind me. So they're on their own. Do the best you can. I'll keep sanding and I'll keep shoveling because that's the right thing to do. Some of us try to do the right thing you're supposed to do. I'm concerned about if they're going to change my address, and I'm now on this. I know I'm not a part of the association, but who picks up the trash Now, do I lose town trash? They pick it out in front of my house right now, 537 West Boulevard. Do I have to hire a private trash man to pick up my trash now? Does anybody, do I? Yes, no? How does that work?
Regardless of your address, you still have frontage on Weirs Boulevard. If you can
So I can wheel it
get your
down the
trash
street
down to
down?
Weirs Boulevard just like you are now,
The
then
mail will not be delivered there, though. The mail will come up to Ashley Court.
yes, it will.
Will that be placed in a mailbox down at the end of the T, or does the mail truck come up the private driveway and deliver my mail?
Probably will be to I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know. I don't know
Okay,
the answer to
another
that.
question.
Normally, under condominium association type thing, it would be a
Correct, but I'm not a part of the
group
association.
mailbox,
kiosk.
and whether you're gonna have a mailbox there or not, we'll find that out.
Okay.
We are suggesting that you change your address only because, from a 911
I understand that,
standpoint,
yes.
there's no way for them to get from actual Weirs Boulevard to your house unless they want to climb the slope, and
I understand.
and eventually there's going to be a nice road that goes to your house, so we would prefer you to have an address on that road for that emergency access purpose.
Okay.
That's a request that's coming from the planning department, not from the developer.
Okay, I would just ask that the few of you that are left on here that are still riding out the storm here, that we think long and hard about everybody, not just the people that come up and talk. I mean, I appreciate you listening to us and all, and our own grievances, and we have our own little lives, but when Weirs Boulevard is bumper to bumper, think about what that does to the summer people that are coming up here. And that's most of the money that's coming up, so we should just think long and hard about what we do. Please do the best you can for everybody. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
So one more thing before you leave, sir. If that development does go through, you're gonna be using their road, correct?
I'm thinking of putting a road in off of Boulevard. I don't want to deal with that headache.
You're saying a driveway?
A driveway. I have plenty of frontage too. I don't know where you're putting that bike path and all y'all, because it's rock right to the street. I mean, I've had bids of 30, 40 grand to put a driveway in there, but I'm certainly not gonna deal with that nonsense if I don't have to.
So what about the people behind you? Are they
I don't
gonna have the
know.
same access?
No, they have to come up the road. They have no choice. Unless I give them something through my yard up that steep hill, which that doesn't make sense. They're too old to be going up there. They'll have to go through the other development, unfortunately. But I at least have frontage. Maybe I'd rather do that, no offense. But I'd rather have my own in and out and not have to deal with that traffic.
But once that road is in, will the elderly people he's talking about, will there be a connection to
Yeah,
their
they're right on it.
driveway?
They'll be fine. They'll be okay once it's put in. My question is, they're putting the road in and around for phase one that's supposed to be wide enough and maintained, but oh my gosh, there's nobody maintaining anything up there. Look, ask these folks. Nobody's maintaining anything. No offense, but it's not happening. That's reality, you know, and I got work too. I'm tired. I don't want to be here. I got things to do too, but this is important.
Well, just one question, and bear with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to get a hold of this whole thing, because I'm new here. If this development got completely squashed, what would happen?
It would be probably the same as it is right now, I would imagine.
Well, would he care whether the road is salted or not, if he's never gonna do anything
He
with the
obviously
property?
doesn't care about much at all. That's.
Well, I'm just
being sense for
wondering,
the
what
obvious.
happens if nothing happens?
If nothing happens.
So who's gonna maintain that driveway?
I'll keep doing what I'm doing, I guess. I mean, I'm not complaining about it under the circumstances. I want to keep them so they can get somebody to the people behind me. But you're going to bring in a whole bunch of more people up here that are going to need that kind of thing. Don't you understand? It's not just about the one or
But
two
it
people.
sounds like they're gonna improve the accessibility to
Sounds
that
good. Does
location.
it sound good to you, Paugus Woods folks? Sounds good, sir, but
Well,
that's
is
not
a
how it works.
hot topping something better than dirt?
Are you happy with your hot top street? Okay.
But in this memorandum, that's gonna be taken care of.
Ah, the paper. Yeah, the paper.
Well,
Rely on
I'm just voicing what we have in the memorandum here, that's all. But who maintains the Paugus Woods roads now, themselves?
Contractor through Brady Sullivan.
The landscapers, they do the one.
And do you pay an association dues to have that done?
Yeah.
Don't pay your dues anymore.
I think we shouldn't be giving advice about this kind of situation.
No, but I'm just
And
saying-
We shouldn't have a conversation with
Right.
the entire crowd.
I have
We
one
can-
other question. It said in one of these pages in this stuff that
Okay.
I printed out.
I know you
that
stated your name once, would you just do it?
Marilyn Barbetta.
Okay.
The water pump at Paugus Bay, now, it got hit by lightning and we all got assessed another $700. If these people are using it too, are they gonna have to pay fines when things happen? If they're using a water pump? When the electricity went out for 4 days,
That's part
I
of
didn't
the,
even have enough water to take a shower and get the cremants out of my hair.
that's part of the agreement that they're working with the water department.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of points. The complaint that you have from Rhode Island, I would suggest you do an internet search for the name of the plaintiff and the name of the attorney who signed it. Both of those individuals have monetary interest, and you'll see when you Google them who they are, and it speaks for themselves. In terms of private driveways, Brady Sullivan doesn't have an obligation to maintain that road. It's a driveway. Paugus Woods, we haven't heard complaints about the roads. If they,
Okay, all right, please. Please. Please.
if you have complaints about the plowing, you have to let Brady Sullivan know so they can talk to the contractor. No, we're talking about, I heard about plowing problems.
Okay.
Okay, so the point is, it's an association. If you need to make a complaint about the plowing, there's a contractor, and that information ends up being reported and resolved. So for each of these issues, there's a basis and reasoning behind it. Langley Cove stands on its own. There's going to be conditions of approval, and those conditions are going to be comprehensive. We've talked to Brandy and Dean about those conditions. We've agreed to all of them so far, subject to some tweaking. So that's all I can say in response to these comments so far.
Well, let's see if we're done with the comments from members of the public. Is there anybody else who would like to address the issues of the board?
Good evening. My name is Tom Miller. I live at 27 Siesta Lane, Paugus Woods. We were assessed a special assessment for plumbing of a waste line that was put in to one of the houses. And supposedly this is inspected by the town, and the pipe came out, did this and that, and he kept getting backups in his house. They called out the plumbers, they came in, they did the repair. We were all assessed, I'm not sure what the number was again. How much were we assessed, do you know? Everybody was assessed like $237 for this. Don't they have insurance that would cover? Because this is common property where they had to dig up. And my concern is, we have no way of knowing if they collected insurance and then still charged us, or anything. We have no way of knowing. There is no reciprocation back and forth between them and us. We talk to Beth. Beth says she'll get back to you. She gets back to you one way or the other, or never gets back to you, and never finishes what she's supposed to do. And I find this insulting. We're not allowed to have an association, a homeowners association, because they still own everything. But we have no way except to individually call Beth, and nobody knows what's going on. And I find this insulting. And again, this is the way they do things. They don't want to do anything for us. I understand from the beginning this access road was supposed to go in. But it's supposed to be to have two ways in, one way and the other way. But for us, we've only have one way, and we've only had one way. And all of a sudden now, they have to do this because they have to have two ways in. And we get nailed with it. Our roads are deplorable. They're nothing but cracked up blacktop. Palmetto is a disaster. It floods.
How many roads are you talking about?
Well, Palmetto is bad. There are sections all over that are really not good. They came in, they do a repair. My neighbor across the street had a section of the road, you could step on the road and it just sunk right down and the water would just ooze up and out. So they came in, they cut a section out and did it. Didn't seal it with anything, just cut it, blacktopped it, and walked away. They don't really maintain anything up there. The roads are deplorable. I don't know how you can put another coat of blacktop over something that is nothing but cracked up subbase. I can't see how it can be done that way. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening. Sandy Bedford, 14 Siesta Lane. I'm the unlucky person that when that sewer backed up in my neighbor's yard, I got a 6-foot wide path cut across my whole yard from one side to another. I could not access my home for a week. They have been back 7 times to fix my lawn, fix my driveway. It was all, the work that was resultant because my neighbors backed up and they went across. I was never consulted on anything. I basically came home one day to digging in my house and water seeping everywhere. And they need to refix my driveway, which I was told they never did the top coat on any of the driveways on Siesta Lane, so that it would be okay and that they would fix my driveway this spring. So they told me to get some estimates and to go with somebody that they have, and also to get my own estimate to get my driveway fixed. I now have a gully in the middle of my driveway that I have to drive through every single day. So I'm waiting to see what they're going to do right by me in the spring. But they said they would do it when they repaved all the roads that everybody's having to drive down that don't have blacktop on it, just have the cracked and crumbled thing. But now I'm also the one that's dealing with a driveway that's like that. So I literally have a 12-inch deep area on my driveway that I fall into every time. And the landscaping company has redone my lawn 6 times. I reseeded my lawn myself 4 of the times because it didn't take. And yet, each and every one of my fellow members, it was a running joke that I felt like crap because my house was the one that had all the damage, and they all paid for it. So I was afraid to go out and say hello to my neighbors for a few weeks because even though it wasn't my lawn, my yard that had the sump pump issue, it was my dig out that caused all these people to pay extra money. And yet they're not doing anything about it. And I will get to the whole Beth is useless thing. And when we do call her, she's, not very responsive. I literally have documents and pictures of the before construction, after construction. And you don't know what it's like to come home to a house that you were not expecting. And your neighbor, one of my neighbors who's not here tonight, sent me a photo on my phone to show me that my house had a 6-foot wide trench, 48 feet long across both my lawns and my driveway. So there is irresponsibility on the part of Brady Sullivan. They're not there for the people that are in this complex, and then turn around and make everybody pay for this mess that went on. So, before you consider allowing them to come through our complex, which, as my neighbor said, is not wide enough for double traffic, we don't have a second access. Hell, if there's a fire at the beginning of our road, none of us are getting out. But yet there's going to be a second access for this new phase that you've given them permission for through our property. And if they don't develop phase 3, guess who's going to be paying for all those repavings and all that as we watch 395 other homes drive across our property? So I think we really need to look long and hard at putting some restrictions on them. Yes, you could start your project on the Weirs Boulevard when you fix Paugus Woods. Thank you for your time.
there anybody else who would like to have a word? Okay. I don't think I need to close the hearing.
Continue the hearing to
All right.
next month, please.
Yes, so you technically have to close it and then ask the board to vote to continue it to March 6th.
Well, it's 7:36, 29 and counting, and I close the public hearing. At this point, before I ask for a continuance to the next planning board meeting, I guess I want to get some input from anybody here on the board about what your concerns are, if you choose to at this time. I'm not just giving you the opportunity.
I have a big concern. I can't understand why the developer can't build a second access road so you don't have to cut through Pogus Woods residential streets.
Langley is the second access road. This has always been the plan. When these folks bought their homes, in their documents, it provided, and it was presented at the last meeting, that Langley was going to be connected. So they talk about a single access now. Their second access is Langley. And when they bought their homes, it was clear in their documents that Langley would be used for access.
I thought I saw something that there was going to be a private access road. If Langley was not developed and you built out Pogus Woods, there would have to be a second road.
That was a thought early on that was abandoned, and this Langley solution became the final solution, and that's why it was included in the Pogus documents before any of those houses were sold. So second access for Pogus is Langley, second access for Langley is Pogus.
I honestly, sir, I don't see that as a solution. It seems like more of a problem than a solution.
Well,
Why
that's how this was.
cannot there be a second road along the Pogus Woods to White Oaks, along the side?
Why would you want two access to Pogus, to White Oaks? Isn't access to Where's Boulevard better?
Where's Boulevard? Sure, but you're going to cut through Pogus Woods to get to White Oaks. Why can't there be a second road that bypasses the Pogus Woods residential into White Oaks?
Because we're here to talk about getting Langley approved, not redesigning Pogus. If Pogus wasn't designed right, then it wasn't designed right. But that's not what we're here for. We're here for Langley.
But Pogus Woods is part of Langley.
And the part of Pogus Woods that is part of Langley was disclosed 8 years ago when this started to be developed. 8 years it's been the case. Nobody bought a lot there, nobody bought a house there without having it disclosed to them. These issues about pipes and lawns, it's all common land. People bought homes.
Well, I understand, you're going to have
within
issues.
common areas.
Yes, and it is a common, but
That's the zoning ordinance it was built under. Laconia created that ordinance. It's a cluster subdivision. It was part of the zoning.
I understand that.
And we inherited that. That was begun by another developer who couldn't complete the project. Brady Sullivan came in and continued that. And it continued based upon a set of rules that it inherited. It didn't ask for those rules. It didn't make those rules. It bought this based upon the rules that already existed.
Any other questions or concerns?
One other issue is, John, I thought at one time you said the developer was going to improve the bridge at Langley Brook. Did I misunderstood?
There's always been a cost-sharing agreement that's been in place. Basically, if it goes through the bridge program, 80% of it gets paid for by the state of New Hampshire, the federal program.
Uh-huh.
The city pays for, I think it's
20.
20%.
And we're asking Brady Sullivan to pay 1/3 of that 20.
1/3 of the 20. Yeah,
Okay.
there's 20% that the city would pay of the whole bridge cost, and Brady Sullivan is going to pay 1/3 of that 20.
Very good, okay.
And we're just trying to resolve the timeline so we can make sure it gets on a list, so it gets funded at some point.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay, now would be the appropriate time for a motion to continue this to the next planning board meeting, which is when?
March 6th.
March 6th? Do I have that motion?
I will make that motion. Do I need to read it all off?
No, I'm okay, I'm all set with it. You've made the motion to continue it till March 6th?
Very good.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Sensing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Let's continue to March 6th.
There is a second application.
Yeah.
Because this is technically two.
Well, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so we've got the actual Langley Cove development and then the amendment to Pogus Woods.
Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up the second application. I want to open up PL 2015-0142 SP AMD with respect to the proposal to amend the original approval to allow for a second access. I'm going to ask the applicant if there's anything further they want to cover with respect to this. Okay. I'll ask.
It's all part of the same.
I understand that, but I didn't technically open it up to this particular thing. So I'm going to open it up to a public hearing. I've heard all of you. If you have something additional you'd like to say, please come forward and do so now. Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, can I get some clarification on the amendment? I don't understand. I mean, I
Well-
think I do, but I just want to make it positive I understand what the amendment is that we're.
In conjunction with the approval of Langley Cove, or 553 Main Street, whatever it is, they need to do some land adjustments, lot adjustments, to make way for the new right-of-way that they're proposing to come through. And in making those adjustments, they have to do a separate application for that. It's really closely tied to the Langley Cove application, but they have to do some lot adjustments to accommodate for the additional road that they're going to put in.
Okay. That means that they're taking a lot that was designated as a lot to be built on, and now they're making it a roadway. Okay.
That's right. They're taking a lot that was originally dedicated to, was planned to be built on, and they're taking it out of that mix and making it a permanent part of the roadway.
Okay.
Simple.
But my point is, we just heard they say that they had this plan already in place when we signed our declarations or on the thing. So apparently, that wasn't there at the time that we signed it because it was a lot. So if we look a lot at the lots that were planned there was no road on the lots going out there.
I understand your point.
So we had no idea that was going to be a road at that time.
I understand your position.
Thank you. I don't know if you do or not.
Oh, no, we do.
Okay, just keep it in step here. Does anybody else like to comment? Sensing none, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:44:59. And now I'll take a second motion to continue this application for the March 6th Planning Board meeting. Do I have that motion, Dennis?
So moved.
Okay. Got a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Sensing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Let's continue till March 6th. Okay. Now, Bill has left, so I'm going to continue on. And when I say continue on, I'm handing it over to you.
New business.
be something we can do to prod them into doing something with the roads up there. There's gotta be something we can do, and I'm trying to figure that out. We ought not to have this discussion.
Why can we have private discussion?
Yes, we can, you and I can have a private discussion.
But not
Not as a
But
group.
Not as a group,
Not as
we
a
can't
group.
have a private discussion.
Just use the
And
word.
when we private, and we gotta be very careful about it. When we
I
discuss
don't
this
understand
private.
all the rules.
Yeah, we just gotta be careful about it.
So we're going to have a presentation on the master plan. As I mentioned to you at the last meeting, the draft of the new vision statement and the land use chapter are on the city website. We also handed out a copy of that to you, and I have more copies tonight in case you forgot to bring your copy with you tonight. Everybody's looking at me like, so
It's on the computer.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we all brought our own copies.
You're either prepared or you're planning to fail, right?
I got
So-
them in here somewhere.
It's all right. We'll hand them out. and
I've got it.
It's all right. So I do have a paper copy of my presentation tonight, but I'm going to hold off handing it out until I'm done so that I have your undivided, hopefully, attention. As you know, the city appointed a master plan steering committee last year. The committee met numerous times. Councilor Bounds was part of that. And we have come up with a new vision statement and a new land use chapter. It's in draft form. And that's what's going to be before you for consideration over the next couple of months. So I want to review the two documents with you and give you the basics of what the steering committee was thinking and what this will mean for the city going forward. And Mr. Lamani was part of the committee as well, and Mr. Catardo. The vision statement you can read. It's right there on the first page of the handout I gave you there. It not only sets up the vision for the land use chapter, but it also will be set up for the future updates to other chapters. We will have economic, transportation, natural resources, and other chapters. The only two things that we are required under state law to do is the vision statement and the land use chapter, which is what we have concentrated on, but at some point in time in the near future being defined in the next 1 to 2 years, we will look at and revise the other chapters of the master plan to update them and also try to make them conform to the vision statement as much as we can. The vision statement's intended to be high level and brief, but realistic and achievable. And everything in the land use chapter and subsequent chapters should be consistent with the vision statement. So then we'll move on to the land use chapter, which starts with a thing that's introduced as number 1, introduction. And as you know, as I said, we just had a committee that reviewed things before the steering committee that was established last year. There were other efforts in the city starting in 2015, continuing through 2016 to try to get the process of the master plan underway. We had a couple of charrettes done. We had the Reimagine Laconia campaign. We had different meetings and different committees that looked at things, and for one reason or another, not necessarily a lot of traction occurred. We don't need to revisit ancient history. Key findings that the current Master Plan Steering Committee covered was the so-called Laconia advantage, and almost every community has what they think is an advantage, and they think they're the best since sliced bread, and it's a great attitude to have, and we certainly have that attitude as well. And what we want to do is try to take what we perceive to be the Laconia advantage and take advantage of that and use it going forward. As you know, the Great Recession had a big impact not only on the city but the nation, and there were a lot of issues that resulted from that, including stagnation in development in the city particularly, but elsewhere as well. We all know that there is a growing imbalance of the mid-priced market homes in the community. Mid-price being defined as approximately $200,000 to about $350,000. The other thing that we know, oops, wrong way, sorry, is that Laconia's population has been stagnant for about 30 years. It's been hovering around the 16,000 mark for quite some time, and will probably stay that way if we don't do something drastic. The land use chapter, as we get into the number 2 and beyond on the actual land use chapter, the proposed land use chapter is a very significant departure from the previous 2007 version. It is very short on purpose, and it contains a limited number of specific recommendations and goals, and there was an attempt not to introduce any pie-in-the-sky statements and to minimize the usage of planning buzzwords, although we do have a few, but we tried to minimize as best we could, and concepts that may be in vogue elsewhere that we just wanted to get down to the bottom and try to do something that's realistic. There are some very important planning concepts presented, though, and we will get to those in a minute. The overall message of the land use chapter is twofold. One is the city wants to drastically change our zoning regulations to better encourage development, both residential and non-residential. And the purpose would be to streamline our rules and regulations and make it easier for development to occur, but not, and I repeat, not sacrifice the important quality of life and environmental standards that we are so well known for. And the second message is the city is open for business. That is not a message that a lot of communities necessarily present to the outside world. Just a couple of examples of some zoning changes that the steering committee talked about, and we will be hopefully going forward with in the future, assuming that the vision statement and land use chapter are adopted. And that is, just to give you an example, the greater downtown area right now, and depending upon where you define greater downtown, but is subject to 7 to 9 different zoning zones. Each of those zones have their own regulations, setbacks, uses, sign regulations, et cetera, et cetera. It is kind of weird to me, being relatively new to the community, to think that a business on the south side of Canal Street has a different set of sign regulations than the businesses on the north side of Canal Street, just to use an example, or the businesses in the vicinity of the parking garage have different sign regulations than the businesses up near Veterans Square. So it doesn't make any sense to me. I understand historically why things were done the way they were done, but it could be time to make a change. And so the idea is that in this case, we would create one greater downtown zone and one set of regulations, put all the businesses onto one footing so that they're all competing equally. And we probably will combine some lots and areas of the city that are not currently zoned commercial or zoned downtown traditional zones into those areas to try to encourage growth of the downtown. Zone consolidation makes for equitable development opportunities. And as we all know, historically lines were drawn and zones were created and defined largely based on what was already there. For instance, we have this thing called business, commercial, industrial, and we have 3 or 4 instances of that. We have little lines into zones drawn around old industrial buildings that have been there since the turn of the century or even longer. And the idea always is when you're trying to draw zone lines is to try to make as many properties within that zone conforming so that you don't have to have variances and those kinds of things. But I think there's ways to accommodate a one zone and just do some definitions and some footnotes and those kinds of things in the zoning ordinance that allows you to do what things need to be done in certain areas that don't conform to the rest of the land in that area. Recent development trends in Laconia are well known. Lots of higher-end second homes or lots of so-called subsidized housing and not a whole lot in between. One of the goals highlighted in the land use chapter is to facilitate mid-level priced homes and at the same time to grow our commercial base. A growing commercial base can only be, will help provide property stabilization and job opportunities, and in many cases they go hand in hand. You're not going to have population growth without job opportunities, and you're not going to have commercial growth without some population growth. If you want to go to the master plan and go to page 6, if you could for a moment, this is a kind of something that kind of follows on with what we've just been discussing with the applications. Page 6 illustrates projects that have been approved over the past, say, 10 years, and they still have available units left to build. They have lots or units if it's condos or whatever. Right now we have more than 500 units that could be built in the city, and most of them are in the higher end. Not all of them, but most of them are in the higher end. You know, we're talking about Governor's Crossing and Meredith Bay and et cetera, those, nobody's going to question the fact that these are the higher end homes of the city. To have 500 units unbuilt is not an unusual situation. I don't want people to think that this is a problem or that something went wrong. It's not the case. In some of this is a direct result of the Great Recession of 2009 and 10. And many communities have this issue where developments were approved in 2006 and 7 when things were gangbusters, and then all of a sudden the bottom falls out and developers are sitting there, and we have the situation tonight where they're asking for an extension. This is happening all over New Hampshire. This is not unique. Like I say, it's not a problem, but it is a reality. The mix of commercial property versus residential needs to be modified to achieve property tax stabilization and to provide employment opportunities. Currently, right now, we have about 15% of our land is non-residential, commercial, industrial, office, et cetera, and 85% is residential. A better mix would be 30 to 35% non-residential. That would help with our tax stability. It also would help with job opportunities. The state land, which has been given another set of life, it's probably like a cat, it's got 9 lives. I don't know how many lives are on right now, but the state commission that has been established seems to be making good progress and is very serious about the work they're doing, and they have a mandate from the governor and they have a mandate from the legislature to try to make things happen. However, if you look at the little zoning map over there, you'll see that the state land property is zoned RR1, which is 1 acre zoning for single family houses. Not exactly compatible with the kinds of things that the State Land Commission is talking about doing. So that's one of the things that we need to address. The land use chapter also proposes to extend any zoning modifications that we make into that area to kind of push out from the state land if it is at all successful, and we certainly hope that it is. We're hoping for spillover effect. We're hoping it's so successful that they sell out all their land and people are going to be looking for more of the same, and there is plenty of more of the same in the general area. There are, of course, some facilities, infrastructure facilities that we need to do, but we have highlighted the Parade Road, Elm Street intersection area within, how big you want to draw the circle from that, whether you want to go half a mile or a mile or however far you want to go. We've also talked about the Hilliard Road area Obviously, there needs to be considerable improvement, and if you go to page 14 of the master plan, real quick, we're going to kind of jump around a little bit here. That is the future land use map that we came up with. There are 5 areas that we are have concentrated on. That is a particular focus within the master plan land use chapter. These should not be a surprise to anyone. The first one is the Greater Weirs area, Endicott Street North and south to some degree, the Hilliard Road area, the state land area, the greater downtown area, and the commercial zone that extends along Union Avenue and Court, and then the South Main Street area of Laconia. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these in just a moment here. Laconia proposes a pro-population growth land use strategy with a focus on mid-market residential housing. And that is something that is very different than most communities in New Hampshire are emphasizing, although that focus is changing in different parts of the state, but for the most part, most communities are not emphasizing population growth. To achieve this strategy requires the following. There's a lot of P's in this. There's patience and promotion. This takes time and consistency. I will give you an example. I come from Dover. About 20 years ago, 25 now almost, they rezoned a large portion of the city into what they called an enterprise zone. Basically, it was to encourage high-tech, light industrial, office, et cetera, corporate type settings. And the land sat there empty for many years. And then Liberty Mutual came along and built a very large corporate campus there. There were many people in the community who said, it's not happening, nothing's going on up there, this is a waste of land, you know, you could put 500 new homes up there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the patience part. It takes time. Pease development, Pease Air Force Base, took many years for it to really take off, and the initial thought was that the airport was going to be the big factor. You know, we're going to have Boston, Logan North, and et cetera, et cetera. And what's really happened is corporations have gone in and built a large number of buildings. They've rehabbed the big existing buildings. There are now many thousands of jobs on the old Pease Air Force Base, more jobs there than there ever was when it was an Air Force Base. So, but again, it took time, it took patience, and those kinds of things. Next thing is performance zoning. This is probably, I hope, the only buzzword that we maybe have in the whole document. And I'll talk more about performance zoning in a moment. It's a key part of this of the land use chapter. Partnerships. We need to make our decisions with the stakeholders, people who already own the land, people who are thinking about doing things, and we need to create public-private partnerships when possible. And the last P on this list is parking. Excuse me. It's a perennial downtown problem, and quite simply, we need to make a decision. And we'll talk a little bit more about parking in a moment. Many of these areas targeted for development and need infrastructure, particularly water and sewer, and this will require some creative ways to pay for that. But the reality is, if it isn't there, nobody's going to do anything. And that's the bottom line. It's not it could very well be if you build it, they will come type situation. If you don't build it, they certainly will not come. So this leads us to performance zoning. This is a relatively new, and when I say relatively new, I'm talking 5 to 10 years. You know, in planning circles, a new concept is 5 to 10 years old. But it's pretty widely used by a number of communities, both in New Hampshire and elsewhere. It accommodates greater flexibility in land use planning process. And basically, in a very, the 25 words less description, instead of creating our land use chart and all our definitions for what is permitted and what isn't permitted within a zone, performance zoning basically says, here's what you can't do. And you come to us and tell us what you want to do, and then we decide whether that makes sense or not. So for instance, some of the things we could say, we do not want you to do. We do not want you to harm the environment. You need to maintain the buffers around wetlands and brooks and et cetera, et cetera. You need to not create undue traffic problems, et cetera, et cetera. So we could have a fairly limited, comprehensive set of things. This is what you can't do. But if it's a piece of land and it's large enough to accommodate X, Y, and Z, and you want to do X, Y, and Z, and you can show us that this makes sense, that it's not going to create undue burden on the community, this is going to be a good thing, then the planning board would have the leeway to do that, as opposed to looking at an entire set of regulations. You'd have this, you can't do that, and you go, nope, they didn't do that, they didn't do that, they didn't do that, and they're proposing all this, good to go, if you agree with it. It's kind of subjective sometimes. It puts the planning board in the position of, this would be good for Laconia, as opposed to, we really can't do anything to stop it because they meet all the requirements. It's more of a, puts a little more responsibility on the shoulders of the planning board. And I personally, I don't think that's a bad thing.
Dean, you can, if you don't mind mentioning
Sure,
a little
yeah.
bit about how, like, things have changed a little bit in our communities too, where you don't have like the professional office zone. You don't have that.
Yeah.
And so some people have home, very professional offices within, and that wouldn't be allowed in the type of zoning we've had. So it allows us to kind of breathe in the way businesses change too.
Yeah, I mean, part of that rezoning thing is we have to look at some of the zones that we've defined traditionally. We have several areas in the city, for instance, that are defined for professional office space. Well, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that was probably a good idea, and that was maybe the thing to do. And if you look at where the zones are, they're along the main corridors. They're on North Main Street, and they're on Union Ave, and they're on, you know, it's where cars are going already, and we're saying, okay, it makes sense. It makes sense to do that. You know, the reality is in this day and age, as Mike says, you know, we have more home-based occupations. People can certainly do a lot more out of their homes than they ever could a long time ago. And things like medical offices are not, you know, the mom and pop, well, not mom and pop's not the right word, but I mean, we probably all grew, well, maybe not on that side of the table, but we probably all grew up with, we went to our doctor was a doctor, and he had a doctor, and maybe he had a nurse and a receptionist, and that was the doctor's office. Today, there are very, very few doctor's offices that fall into that category. You know, there are a few guys that do specialties that maybe that's, but when you go to your GP, you know, there's 4 or 5 doctors in one office and 12 nurses and, I mean, you know, the whole 9 yards. So the concept of how we used to look at offices is definitely changed. And between what's happened traditional, with technology and what's happened with other trends of, and healthcare is not the only issue, you know, the only thing that has, you know, consolidation. But, so we have to look at that, and maybe that's the kind of thing where in a professional zone, maybe it makes sense to have offices on the first floor with apartments or condos over them or whatever. It makes sense, you know. So those are the kinds of things that we have to look at. Another example, and I don't think I covered it in here, but we have 4 different kinds of industrial zones. We have the industrial park, we have industrial airport, we have BCI, and there's one more, and I forget what it is, but anyway, 4 industrial zones. The reality is, and I think I made this statement more than once at the steering committee, is if someone comes to Dover and says, hey, I don't want to locate my business here, we're not going to say no, regardless of where you want to go in any of those industrial, quote, zones. You know, if you want to go to the BCI zone over here, and that's over here off of Court Street, you want to bring jobs and investment in the community, by all means, thank you very much and welcome. But we need to make the zoning reflect the ability to do that, because in each one of those industrial zones, there's a whole list of regulations of what you can and cannot do, and they're all based on things that are probably passé at this point in time. So that's the way it works. We have two different kinds of apartment zones. We have the garden apartment. I don't know how long it's been since anybody's built a garden-style apartment building anywhere, but certainly in Laconia it's been quite a while. We got a whole bunch of them up on Blueberry Lane, and that's completely built out. And then we have a couple of other little areas, and then we have another apartment zone, and it's like, if someone wants to build apartments, build apartments. We'll figure out the rules and regulations to allow you to do that. And that's the kind of things that we need to change. That's what we're trying to do with the new land use chapter.
Yeah, I guess I just want to comment that I think what the committee has tried to do and what we're looking at is kind of a approach to zoning, performance-based, planned unit development-based, but an approach to zoning that allows enough flexibility for people to come in and do innovative stuff, creative stuff, allow them to do that, and yet still be in a position that we can exercise some reasonable controls to make sure that people aren't just running roughshod over the city of Laconia. And I think that that's what this chapters 1 and chapters 2 really are trying to outline in terms of what our vision ought to be as the city of Laconia in terms of future development, because we really do make some, I won't call them radical, but certainly innovative recommendations about how to use our zoning ordinance to conceptualize development along Hilliard Road, to conceptualize development in the northwest quadrant. And the committee, and Mike was on the committee, the mayor was on the committee, I forget who, the other people, really tried to focus in on that area of what we're going to do, and that's what this document really tries to do, or start something, because, as Dean said, we got, 7 different zoning areas within spitting distance of this building. It's just quite remarkable. So we could do a downtown zoning ordinance that would accommodate a lot of what's already here, and sort of give us an opportunity to bring in businesses that might be attracted by the downtown. And we've got some real opportunities here. And the opportunities are the Colonial Theater, which I'm a big fan of, and the state school property, the ongoing development there. So that's just my thoughts. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. And you mentioned, potential development on places like Hilliard Road or whatever. And the idea would be to, and Hilliard Road was chosen because there are some very large tracts of land up there. Now, whether the landowners want to sell them or not, that's a different matter, and that's one of the discussion that we need to have with the landowners up there. And when we talk about talking with stakeholders and trying to do partnerships, is what do you want to do with your land? But assuming that someone does want to sell a 50, 60, or 70 acre piece of land or whatever is available, what you do is you craft it so that within that large lot and within that development you can be fairly dense and mixed use and those kinds of things, but around the perimeter of that lot you provide a buffer so that the people next door have a nice buffer and they're not having noise and they're not having light and those kinds of things. And that's how you do, that's how, one way to do that is to provide these buffer zones around individual large developments, but within the development itself, you allow things to become more dense than what we certainly would, today. The other thing that I want to talk about is, if you don't mind me continuing on, the combination of performance zoning with a thing called development agreements. And this is where if we set up performance zones, a developer comes in and says, okay, I got these 50 acres, I want to do, 100 houses, I want to do some, 30 or 40,000 square feet of commercial space, I want to have some offices, all within one little area. And we say, okay, what we would do is execute a development agreement with the developer, which would outline, basically it's a contract between the city and the developer. You're going to do this, we're going to do that. If you don't do this, you're still going to owe us money. You're still going to have to pay for this. You're still going to have to pay for taxes as if you had done it. Those kinds of things. It's a one step, but a big step beyond what we would traditionally have for our site plan approval, which we traditionally have. We have a whole set of regulations, recommendations and restrictions and conditions, and those all become part of the record, and then they go and they do their thing. But as we've seen tonight, if at some point in time they just stop building, they just stop building. They can ask for extensions or those kinds of things, but in a development agreement, if they stop building, they're still going to have to pay the taxes as if they had built out, as an example. So there's those kinds of things that go hand in hand with this. And we are looking at performance zones, proposing performance zones in the state school area, that general area, probably Hilliard Road area, and perhaps other areas. And within, you could have multiple performance zones, and they don't have to have all of the same criteria or definitions. You could have slightly different criteria in each performance zone. You could have the same in all of them. I mean, that's something that we're going to have to decide as we go along. But you could have one for the state school area. You could have another one for, say, the Weirs area, those kinds of things. So let's get down to the actual future land use recommendations that are in the master plan land use chapter. First one is reevaluate the greater downtown zones. We've talked about that. We now have 7 to 9 zones. The idea is to create one. Institute performance zoning. We got to define the criteria, and this is going to be a team effort of staff, the community, the planning board, and we may need to hire a consultant to come in and help us with that. There are some very good examples of performance zoning in Salem and Londonderry that have been very successful, and we certainly can cut and paste regulations off the internet as fast as anybody else can. So I have no embarrassment whatsoever about admitting that we're going to go beg, borrow, and steal wherever we can concepts and wording. Emphasize 79E and the 7280-83 tax incentives. The city already has them in use. The idea is to try to expand their use. Review the housing redevelopment overlay district. You may or may not know what this is because it's very, very seldom used, and it's got some issues in terms of timing and documentation issues that need to be done. So we need to look at that and either revise it so that we can make it useful.
Get rid of it.
Or get rid of it and maybe do a different concept, whatever. But, and that's, I mean, another part of revamping the zoning is doing away with things that either aren't working, are beyond their useful life, whatever, and do more things that are more modern. Facade improvements. I understand there was a program a few years ago called Front Porch or something along that line where there was some awards given to people who fixed up the front of their businesses or their homes and made them look nicer. I think that would be a good idea to reinstitute maybe some CDBG funds or something along that line. Parking. I told you we'd get back to parking. It's not just the downtown. Lakeport has a real parking problem as well. If we want to get some type of redevelopment in some of the older buildings that are in Lakeport Square, there's no place for anybody to park. There's no real substantial public parking. So we're going to have to solve that issue. And along with parking becomes a regulation review. Any building in the present downtown that gets redeveloped, and if someone puts apartments into them, there's going to be parking requirements. Historically, we've said, oh, well, they'll park in the parking garage. Well, we got one level in the parking garage available, and I'm not sure that the parking garage is necessarily going to be there in 2 or 3 years or whatever. Hopefully something is there, but that's the discussion that we have to have. But at the same time, it also becomes a matter of regulations. Maybe every apartment that's made in, say, the downtown area does not have to have a parking space. Maybe with the clientele that may be interested in those types of apartments, maybe they don't have cars. So, you know, we have to look at those things and come up with some realistic regulations. It's not just provide more parking, but it's also to look at realistically at regulations. Mixed-use zoning goes hand in hand with performance zoning. It could be incorporated on its own, or it could be incorporated within performance zoning or those kinds of things. Tax increment finance districts, we currently have 3 that are active in the city, and maybe we need to create additional ones or an additional one to cover the areas that we've been talking about, the Elm Street Parade Road intersection area. There is some water, there is some sewer, but it's very limited and it doesn't go very far. There is none on Hilliard Road. You know, so again, you got to have it there or nobody's going to do anything. But there are ways to do that again with these private-public partnerships, and going back to the development agreements. This is the situation where we could say, okay, we will put in the water, we will put in the sewer, and you will build, and then you're going to pay us for that stuff. That's one way of doing it, and that's a very simplified statement, but that's the basic concept.
So you're saying that the city would front the money to put the water and sewer in?
That's one possibility. Exactly. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's one possibility.
All they have right now is partial sewer. They have no water.
Some areas have some water and don't have sewer. Some areas have access to sewer and don't have water, and a lot of the areas have neither. So, but yeah, but that's one concept. Yes. Yep.
And you're doing it in the context of an agreement.
Right.
That is binding to the party. So it's really a very thoughtful way of looking at it. And it's also fairly creative. And you're giving a lot of leeway saying, look, we're not going to restrict you to all these different pieces. So it's allowing innovation, creativity, some thoughtfulness. And by coming to the board and being able to discuss this and plan it, it has the community involvement we need. The only thing that, even what we heard tonight, that's really key is enforcing what is done correctly.
Right.
And I think that's where all of our cities like this in New Hampshire fall down, and that's where they get into problems, is being able to enforce that.
Yep.
And that's the toughest part, you know.
Yep.
Right. Just one little interjection in
Sure.
this. Could you just tell me that, you know, I drive around town and I'm in the business, so is this thing that you've got here, all these homes that aren't built, they're not up to date. They can't be.
Yeah, this is
Lenny Lane is almost 100% built out.
this was like as of November or December, or maybe
this
a little
year?
before of 2000. Yep.
Yeah, it's got a couple lots empty.
Yeah, but you've got 9.
What page are you on?
Page 6.
Huh?
There's not 9 lots left in Lenny Lane that's
No,
not
they're
built on?
not now, but there was. This was probably 3-4 months ago that we put together this list. He's been building. I mean, he's been pretty successful up there. So.
I mean, there's a margin of error.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, what I'm getting at is, you see, you know, like I said, I'm in the business, so I see what's good and what's bad. Now, you see Lenny Lane, and then you just go the other side of town, and you see a development that's been there for years and years and years, and they're supposed to be high-end homes, and Lenny Lane sells like overnight. The reason is because of the builder. It's not.
It's also the price point. It's also the price point. I mean,
Well,
Lenny Lane is
price point.
well, I'm not sure what other
I don't wanna
development you're
say
talking
what
about,
development
but
I'm
this is,
talking about, but
but it's not the same price point as say Meredith Bay or whatever it's called.
No, those are 400 or 500.
Right, or Christmas
$600,000
Island, or
Well, we
whatever.
can just check that
Well, okay,
update
so
the
I mean,
status. That's simple enough.
and it, it's a snapshot, and maybe it's 450 now. The point is, there's a lot of units out there that are left to be built, and most of them, like I said before, not all of them, but most of them are high-end. They're not, Ninny Lane is definitely not high-end, definitely mid-price.
250,000.
Yeah, right, definitely mid-priced. The one that's labeled M, Lilac Valley, I think has all of the lots that were approved are available, are available. They haven't done anything. They put in their bridge and they put in part of their road, and they haven't done much beyond that. Our information is that they may be going there soon to start building, and they would be looking at mid-priced homes there as well.
Yeah.
But,
like Governor's Crossing's the same way. They're
He's
$250,000 to $300,000
This
houses.
is more conceptual. You were getting into like the minutia of individual developments, which wasn't the real point of this.
That's
Saying
right.
that there's that kind of availability, it's not completely being taken advantage of across the city.
Right.
In general.
Right, but
Right?
what...
And maybe
what-
this is just a
well,
snapshot or illustration.
You're not getting my point.
Yeah.
You're getting shoddy builders that are not selling homes because they are shoddy homes.
And in some cases, that may
And
very
they
well
leave
be the case.
development half undone, and it looks like a bomb hit them.
Yep,
And
I
you
understand.
get this guy that's doing Lenny Lane like this, and it's neat as a pin. That's the reason why they're selling.
Yep. Yeah, no, you're right. Good developers,
They sell.
they sell, right. You're right. You're absolutely right.
I mean, the purpose is not to try to get builders and developers in here, just to get them in here. To get them in here and get the thing sold so they can reap the rewards of kids going to school and bringing in money into the community.
Yep. Yep,
I mean,
absolutely.
leaving a development half undone is useless.
No disagreement.
I think we can all agree with that. I think we can all agree.
You're preaching to the choir on that. I mean, to the whole concept of it, which is what I think we're trying to
Well, I
achieve.
mean, but what this is,
I mean, we're not on TV, are we?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, we are? Yeah.
Which is why I personally wouldn't want to talk about any developer specifically
No.
or anything
no,
like that.
we don't want to do that, and we don't need to do that. What we need to do is focus on this recommendation.
Moving forward.
That we're moving forward, schedule us for a public hearing with respect to this matter. We've got a meeting on Thursday. I don't know if you're going to be able to make it or not. But unless we make some drastic changes to this document, we can make minor changes at the meeting on Thursday. If we made major changes, which I don't anticipate, since everybody on the committee has had this document for well over a month and a half now, at least.
Yep.
We can make minor changes. We schedule this for a public hearing in March,
Yep.
and then we'll take action on it either in March or in April.
Yep.
That's my game plan, and to get this thing done so that we can start to work on the substance of some of this stuff. We've got other land use chapters that are already drafted and are ready to go. We can incorporate them at any time into the master plan. But what I'm interested in getting done, at least for my purposes, and I think I speak for the committee too, although I'm not, I don't want to.
Not duly authorized.
I don't want to be the guy who speaks for the committee, but I think that everybody who's worked on that committee wants to see this project come to closure in terms of the first two chapters.
Yep.
So that's what I'm interested in doing tonight, in terms of the planning board recommendation, because this is some good stuff.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, because again, this is not meant to be that as specific as what you're addressing.
Right.
And if you think about it, those conditions could happen under any master plan, any group of zoning, and it goes back to enforcement and how we work with vendors and developers as a board. So you're
Right.
bringing up things that happened in many cases decades ago. it's just not appropriate to, in my opinion, to talk about it in the context of something that's kind of a guiding principle, and only that. So it comes back down to what you do here, zoning and enforcement of the actual regulations that we have. That's a completely different topic.
Okay, so I'm going to bring some focus back into this. Why don't you finish up here? Let's rock and roll.
Okay. So continuing on to the actual land use recommendations, the plan unit development. This is not the same as the plan unit development that we had in our zoning ordinance 30 years ago, I think it was. This is a kind of a performance zoning and mixed-use zoning kind of put together. I'll give you an example, and I'm not trying to make anyone get excited or anything, but the perfect example, actually, it is the perfect example that I could give you would be to take the Southdown development as an example, and somewhere in the middle there, create a village that has some service shops, perhaps a small convenience store, you know, a couple of offices, et cetera, and those kinds of things. And so that's the kind of idea behind a planned unit development, so that the people within a fairly large community don't necessarily have to drive out for everything. That there's going to be some services available to them. They can go get their hair cut, they can get down to the corner and
Well, that relates to our conversation.
Absolutely.
See the villages down in Florida.
Exactly, absolutely.
Precisely.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of, exactly.
Do that at the state school.
Right,
With
exactly.
waterfront property.
We want to revisit the commercial resort district, and, you know, what we can do up there. Again, I would refer you back to the performance zoning, the mixed use, and the planned unit development is kind of a combination thing that we could do along Endicott Street North. I don't want to revisit all of the history that occurred the past few years concerning the CR district, but we know we need to do something, and this maybe is a better way to approach it. A conversation to be had at a future date. South Main Street area, this is a very much underutilized gateway to the city. There's lots of existing traffic. There's lots of opportunity for people to take advantage of that traffic. There's already some mixed use in the area, and we certainly could encourage more. And then the rural residential zone, also known as the RR1 and RR2. We think we need to better define that to achieve the look that's desired, but without all of the current restrictions. Basically, the idea behind the RR2 overlay over the RR1, as I understand it, along Parade Road and Meredith Center Road and White Oaks Road, is to create a rural feeling as you're driving down those three roads. So that as you're driving down those actual three roads, you would see trees and bushes, and maybe you'll see some wildlife or whatever, and you won't necessarily be seeing lots of houses. The problem with the way the current zone is defined is that that feeling of expanse continues far into the land, and really all we need to preserve is that view right along the main roads. And once you get into those pieces of land, you get 100 feet or more into those pieces of land, you probably can have closer dimensions than what we currently allow. So those are the kinds of things that we'd be looking at doing. All right, moving on to the last page here. Yay, everybody says. All right, what needs to be done now? Council Bones had already kind of alluded to that. We have a draft of the vision statement and the land use chapter. You need to refer the documents officially to a public hearing, and I would ask that you do that tonight. Public hearing on March 6th. In the meantime, review the actual documents. I'd give you another copy. They're on the website. I would encourage anybody still listening or watching to go to the city website under the planning department, and there's a master plan tab. It has the complete master plan. Also has, for comparison purposes, the 2007 master plan. It's great heavy reading if you want to fall asleep, but I encourage you to review these documents and get back to us as soon as you can with any minor corrections or comments that you might have. We're trying to reach out to the public as much as we can. We're going to try to get a couple articles into the Daily Sun, get a things in the Laconia links going in so that we can try to get people to look at the documents and give us some feedback. And after the public hearing, I would suggest that we have approval of the vision statement and the land use chapter. You could do it during the March meeting, although I think it might be better to wait until the April meeting, but that's certainly your prerogative to do that. So that's what we need to do, part of what we need to do tonight and then the next couple of meetings. And then, once I want to point out the vision statement and the land use chapter do not go to the city council. You are the final approvers on the planning board. And then the hard work begins. Myself and the rest of my staff will be bringing you updates and revisions to the zoning ordinance, which includes the use chart. We will have revisions to the site plan regulations. We will have revisions to the subdivision rules. And there are probably a couple other documents that we will have revisions to that will reflect all of this. And this will be going on for the rest of the year and possibly into 2019. We're going to try to do it as fast as we can. We have kicked around different plans of how we might accomplish that. But the one thing that we know for certain is going to happen when we have these revisions, we got to bring them to the board. You're going to have public hearings, and you're going to have to vote on them and adopt them. In the case of the zoning ordinance, any revision to the zoning ordinance, you guys accept and then recommend approval to the city council, and then it goes off to the city council for another round of, usually another public hearing and their approval, because it's an actual ordinance. Subdivision, site plan regulations, those kinds of things stay strictly within the planning board. And this is not a trivial task. I don't want, it's certainly going to be a very major task for staff. It is going to be a major task for the planning board as well, because in addition to doing these things, you're going to have, hopefully, a number of applications for all kinds of things going on in the city, just as we do every month, that you're going to have to be dealing with at the same time. I know this board has an aversion to extra meetings, but I think in some cases, and not every month, and certainly not maybe in the middle of the summer, but in some cases we may want to schedule a second meeting, kind of like a workshop type meeting, to have a little more informal discussion and air our opinions and et cetera.
But as we go through some of these things, I mean, especially like planned use development, planned unit development, I mean, some of these things are really going to take some hard work on the part of the planning department.
Yes.
And the part of the planning board in terms of what it is we want to do and how it is we want to do it. Because, you know, planned unit development is, I mean, Laconia is not used to it. Laconia just doesn't have a clue at this point in time of how that works, and because we've never done anything like that. So,
you're right, and every step along the way, just using the land use chart and the table of dimensional regulations. I mean, as we know, we've had this discussion a couple times. I hate the word arbitrary when people say, "Oh, well, that's an arbitrary number." Well, in this case, I'm going to agree. In some cases, they are arbitrary numbers. But what is the right number? And at some point in time, somebody sat down and said, "This is the right number." Is it 15 feet from a rear property line? Is it 20 feet? Is it 30 feet? I mean, you know, yes, it is on a certain level, it is arbitrary.
That pool, huh?
Yeah, and it is subjective.
Revisit that pool.
Yeah, exactly. But at some point in time, you got to make a decision, and what is the right number? And I have my ideas. The rest of my staff has their own ideas of what are the right numbers.
And we want you to have your ideas. We want you to have.
But you guys are the final arbitrator of that. You know, if we come in and say, okay, we want to change all these dimensions to 15 feet, and you guys say, oh, no, that's too much or that's too little, however you want to look at it, then I mean, you know, we got to do what you guys are willing to accept and adopt. So I mean, you know, we're going to make suggestions, and we're going to make
promise
recommendations,
you.
and we're gonna push you hard,
Promise you
but
the
on the
planning
other.
board will be active, at least from my
Great.
part, in terms of seeing how this goes. But anyway, anything else?
No, I'm just gonna give you a copy of the summary so that those are the key points that I want you to keep in mind, but I certainly want you to go through the actual land use chapter and give us
Okay.
any comments that you have. And with that, I am done.
Dean, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, without a lot of chatter, if I could get a motion to schedule this for a public hearing on March 6th, I would appreciate it. Schedule the vision statement and the land use statement for a public hearing to be adopted by, proposed to be adopted by the planning board as part of our master plan.
I make a motion that we accept this and bring it up and do it on the March 6th meeting as stated by David.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second the public hearing on March 6th.
Any discussion? Sensing none and breathing heavily. All those in favor, raise your right hand, or left hand, doesn't matter to me. All right, motion passes unanimously. We'll have a public hearing on March 6th. Which brings me to the planning department report. I'm going to consider Dean's presentation as the planning department report. Is there anything else the planning department would like to bring to our attention at this point in time? Nothing? Any liaison reports, like Region Planning Commission, Conservation Commission, City Council? That's me. Nope, got nothing. I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
You need a motion, dude.
Need a motion. Darryl.
Motion
No,
to
I don't,
adjourn.
but I'll take it.
I second it.
I don't need a motion.
All in favor?
I can
All
just,
those in favor? Aye, aye.
okay, all those in favor say aye.
Unanimous.
That's the thing, you don't need a motion to adjourn, you can just adjourn it now. Robert's rules have been changed,
I believe you.
trust me.
Thank you.
To protect the innocent.
You could say no.
Hey, your notebook. Huh?
What do you do?
I'm a heating, air conditioning, and plumbing contractor, plus